The Velen were a peaceful species. They lived on a beautiful world that orbited a soft orange star. Their planet had low gravity, gentle weather, and plenty of food. The Velen themselves were tall and thin. Their skin was almost see-through, and their large dark eyes could see well in dim light. They had never known war. They had never needed weapons. For thousands of years, they lived in peace and built a civilization based on art, music, and kindness. But peace does not last forever. The Keth came without warning. Their warships appeared in the sky like dark clouds. The Keth were conquerors. They moved from world to world, taking what they wanted and destroying what they did not need. They looked like giant armored crabs with cold eyes and sharp claws. They did not care about art or music or kindness. They only cared about power. The first Velen city fell in minutes. The second fell in hours. By the end of the first day, half the planet was burning. The Volunteer stood in the ruins of the Capitol building. Around her, her people were crying and screaming. She had no army. She had no weapons. She had nothing but a simple communication device that could send messages across the stars. She did not know if anyone would hear. She did not know if anyone would care. But she had to try. She pressed the button and spoke into the device. Her voice was shaking, but her words were clear. To anyone who can hear this message, our world is dying. The Keth have come. We cannot fight them. We cannot run from them. Please, if there is anyone out there, help us. The message went out into space. It traveled past asteroids and moons and distant planets. It reached the ears of many species across the galaxy, though most of them did nothing. The Velen were not their allies. The Velen had nothing to offer. Why risk their own safety for strangers? But 18 light years away, someone was listening. Commander Una sat in her chair on the bridge of the United Earth Navy frigate called the Indomitable. She was a woman in her early 40s, with short black hair and tired eyes. She had been a soldier for 20 years. She had seen many battles and lost many friends. But she had never stopped believing that some things were worth fighting for. The Indomitable was on a routine patrol mission. Nothing exciting had happened for weeks. Una was reviewing boring reports when her communication officer suddenly stood up from his station. "Commander," the officer said, "we are receiving a distress signal. It is coming from the Velen system." Una frowned. She knew about the Velen. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They were the gentle ones, the peaceful ones, the ones who had never hurt anyone. "Put it on speaker," she ordered. The bridge fell silent as the message played. The Velen leader's voice filled the room. Una listened to every word. She heard the fear. She heard the desperation. She heard someone begging for help that might never come. When the message ended, no one spoke. Lieutenant Dohan was the first to break the silence. He was a young man with sharp eyes and a calm voice. He served as the tactical officer on the ship. His job was to think about strategy and risk. "Commander," he said carefully, "the Galactic Treaty does not require us to respond. The Velen are not our allies. We have no agreement with them." Una did not look at him. She was staring at the star map on the main screen. The Velen system was a small dot of light among millions of others. "How long would it take us to get there?" she asked. Darwin checked his computer. 6 days at maximum speed. Ensign Hannah, a young woman who worked at the communication station, spoke up. "Commander, I am detecting at least 30 enemy ships in that system. The Keth have a full invasion fleet. We are just one frigate." Una knew the numbers. She knew the risks. One ship against 30 was not a battle. It was suicide. But she also knew something else. She knew that somewhere out there, innocent people were dying. She knew that someone had called for help. And she knew that if she did nothing, She would have to live with that choice for the rest of her life. She thought about Earth. Her homeworld was a harsh place. Humans had evolved on a planet with heavy gravity, extreme temperatures, and dangerous animals. The galaxy called Earth a death world. They called humans Deathworlders. Other species were afraid of humans because they came from such a violent planet. But Yuna knew the truth about her people. Yes, they were strong. Yes, they were tough. Yes, they could survive things that would kill other species. But that was not what made them special. What made humans special was that they cared. They cared about strangers. They cared about people they had never met. They ran toward danger instead of away from it. Not because they wanted to fight, but because they could not stand by while others suffered. Yuna stood up from her chair. She looked at her crew. They were watching her, waiting for her decision. "Set course for the Velen system," she said. "Maximum speed." Dohan opened his mouth to protest, but Yuna raised her hand. "I know the odds," she said. "I know we might not survive. But those people called for help, and we heard them. That means something. It has to mean something." She walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the stars. "We are humans. We come from a death world. The galaxy thinks that makes us dangerous. And maybe they are right. But they do not understand what kind of danger we are." She turned back to her crew. "We are the kind that protects the weak. We are the kind that answers when someone calls for help. We are the kind that does not look away." The bridge was silent for a moment. Then, one by one, the crew members nodded. They understood. They were ready. Engineer Taiho, a large man with grease-stained hands, spoke from his station near the back of the bridge. "The engines are ready, Commander. She will get us there." Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "Then let us go save some lives." The Indomitable turned toward the Velen system and began to move. The stars streaked past the windows as the ship accelerated to maximum speed. In 6 days, they would arrive at a battle they could not win, but they were going anyway, because that is what humans do. 6 days passed slowly on the Indomitable. The crew prepared for battle in every way they could. They checked their weapons. They practiced their drills. They said quiet prayers to whatever gods they believed in. Commander Yuna did not sleep much during those 6 days. She spent most of her time on the bridge, watching the stars and thinking about what was waiting for them. She knew they were probably flying to their deaths. But she also knew that turning back was not an option. Not for her. Not for any of them. On the morning of the 6th day, the ship dropped out of hyperspace. The Velen system appeared on the main screen. At first, it looked peaceful. There was the orange star burning softly in the center. There were the planets orbiting around it. And there was Velen Prime, the home world of the Velen people. But then the sensors showed the truth. 37 Keth warships surrounded the planet. They were sleek and dark, like sharks circling wounded prey. The planet's orbital stations were already destroyed. Pieces of metal and glass floated in space like the bones of dead animals. Down on the surface, fires were burning across 3 continents. Smoke rose into the atmosphere and covered the sky. Ensign Hana looked at her screen with wide eyes. "Commander, I am counting at least 37 enemy vessels. There could be more hiding behind the planet." Lieutenant Dohan's face was pale, but his voice was steady. "We are outgunned 15-1. Maybe more." The bridge was quiet. Everyone knew what those numbers meant, but before anyone could speak, the communication system crackled to life. A harsh voice filled the room. It was speaking in a language that the ship's computer translated instantly. "Human vessel. This is Commander Rillan of the Keth fleet. You are far from your territory. You have no business here. Leave now, and we will not destroy you." Yuna stood up from her chair. She looked at the main screen, where the image of Rillen appeared. He was a large Keth with dark shell armor and eyes like black stones. His claws clicked together as he spoke, making a sound like breaking bones. "You are brave to come here," Rillen continued. "Or perhaps you are stupid. Either way, it does not matter. The Velen belong to us now. Their world is ours. Their people are ours. There is nothing you can do to stop us." Una took a deep breath. She thought about all the things she could say. She could try to negotiate. She could try to threaten. She could try to reason with this creature who had burned cities and killed innocent people. But she decided to do something different. She decided to tell him the truth. "Computer," she said calmly, "open a channel to all Keth ships. I want them all to hear this." The computer beeped. "Channel open, Commander." Una stepped forward until she was standing directly in front of the main screen. She looked into Rillen's cold eyes and began to speak. "This is Commander Una of the United Earth Navy. I am the captain of this ship. We came here because we heard a call for help. We came here because innocent people are dying. We came here because someone had to." Rillen laughed. It was an ugly sound, like metal scraping against metal. "One ship," he said. "You brought one ship against my fleet. Do you think this is a story? Do you think you are heroes? Let me tell you something about the universe, human. The strong take what they want. The weak die. That is the only law that matters." Una did not smile. She did not frown. Her face was as calm as still water. "Let me tell you something about humans," she said. "We come from a world called Earth. The galaxy calls it a death world. Do you know why?" Rillen's eyes narrowed. He did not answer. "Earth is gravity that is 2.4 times the galactic standard," Una continued. "That means everything on our planet is heavy. Our bones are thick. Our muscles are dense. Just standing up is hard work for most species." She began to pace slowly in front of the screen. "Our planet has extreme temperatures. Some places are so hot that water boils on the ground. Other places are so cold that your blood would freeze in seconds. Our ancestors learned to survive in both." Rillen was no longer laughing. His claws had stopped clicking. "We have storms that can destroy cities. We have earthquakes that can swallow mountains. We have floods and fires and droughts that kill millions. And through all of that, we survived." Una stopped pacing. She turned to face Rillen directly. "But the most dangerous thing about Earth is not the weather or the gravity. It is the life. Our planet is filled with predators. Animals that hunt and kill. Creatures with teeth and claws and venom. For millions of years, everything on our world tried to kill us. And we did not just survive. We became the top predator on our planet. The bridge was completely silent. Every member of the crew was watching their commander. So, when you ask me if I think this is a story," Una said, "when you ask me if I think we are heroes, let me give you an answer." She leaned forward, and her eyes became hard as stone. "We are not heroes. We are Deathworlders. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to fight before we learned to talk. We built weapons before we built houses. War is in our blood. Violence is in our bones. You think your fleet scares us? We grew up being scared. We got used to it. We got stronger because of it." Rillen's image flickered. For the first time, something like doubt crossed his face. "You have 37 ships," Una said. "We have one. But I promise you this. By the time this day is over, you will remember us. You will remember what happens when you threaten the things we protect. You will remember what Deathworlders can do." She straightened her back and spoke. The final words. "You wanted to hunt the weak. Congratulations. You just woke up the apex predator of the galaxy." She made a cutting motion with her hand. "End transmission." The screen went dark. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lieutenant Dohan turned to look at the commander. "Orders?" he asked quietly. Yuna sat back down in her chair. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. "Weapons free," she said. "Target the nearest ship and fire when ready." Hannah spoke up from her station. "Commander, should I send a message to Earth? Tell them what we found?" Yuna nodded. "Yes, tell them everything. Tell them where we are and what we are facing. Tell them to send help." She looked at the Keth fleet on the screen. 37 ships against one. "And tell them," she added softly, "that we are not running." The Indomitable began to move forward. Its weapons powered up with a low hum. The crew took their positions. Outside, the Keth fleet was already turning toward them. Weapons were charging. Missiles were loading. The battle for Velen Prime was about to begin, and the Deathworlders were ready. The first Keth missiles came screaming through space like angry hornets. There were dozens of them, enough to destroy a small moon. Any other ship would have been turned to dust in seconds, but the Indomitable was not any other ship. It was a human ship. Lieutenant Dohan's fingers danced across his control panel. "Evasive pattern Delta," he called out. "Hard to port, now." The frigate twisted in space like a fish dodging a net. Missiles flew past on both sides, missing by meters. The ship's point defense guns opened fire, shooting down the missiles that came too close. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Commander Yuna gripped her chair as the ship moved. The Gi forces pushed against her body, but she did not complain. Humans were built for this. Humans were built for pressure. "Return fire," she ordered. "Target their weapon systems." The Indomitable's guns roared to life. Bright beams of energy shot across the void and slammed into the nearest Keth ship. The enemy vessel's shields flickered and sparked. Down in the engine room, Chief Engineer Taiho was sweating. Warning lights flashed all around him. The engines were running at 120% of their safe limit. Any moment, something could break. Something could explode. But Taiho had been an engineer for 15 years. He knew this ship like he knew his own body. He put his hand on the reactor housing and felt it humming under his palm. "Come on, girl," he whispered. "I know you can do this. Just hold together a little longer." The ship seemed to answer him. The engines pushed harder, giving the Indomitable the speed it needed to stay alive. On the bridge, Ensign Hannah was tracking enemy movements. 3 destroyers breaking formation. "They are trying to surround us." Dohan looked at the tactical display. The Keth were using a classic hunting pattern. They would spread out and attack from all sides. It was a good strategy. It worked against most prey, but humans were not prey. "Commander," Dohan said, "I have an idea. It is risky." Yuna almost laughed. "Dohan, we are one ship against 37. Everything we do today is risky. Tell me your idea." The young lieutenant pointed at the screen. "The Keth use predictive targeting. Their computers calculate where we will be and fire at that spot. But their computers are designed for normal species. Species that fly in straight lines and follow logical patterns." Yuna understood immediately. "And we are not normal." "No, Commander, we are not." Dohan's plan was simple but insane. Instead of running away from the 3 destroyers, they would fly directly toward them. They would charge into the middle of the enemy formation, where the Keth ships would be afraid to fire, because they might hit each other. Any other species would never try such a thing. It went against every rule of space combat. It was the kind of plan that could only come from a mind shaped by millions of years of desperate survival. Yuna smiled. "Do it." The Indomitable turned and accelerated straight toward the approaching destroyers. On the Keth ships, alarm systems went crazy. The human ship was not running. It was attacking. Commander Rillan watched from his flagship in disbelief. What are they doing? That is suicide. But it was not suicide. It was something the Keth had never seen before. It was human stubbornness. It was human courage. It was the absolute refusal to give up even when all hope seemed lost. The Indomitable plunged into the middle of the destroyer, formation like a wolf charging into a flock of sheep. The Keth ships hesitated. They could not fire their main weapons without risking friendly damage. Their predictive systems could not track a ship that moved so unpredictably. Dong did not hesitate. Fire everything. The Indomitable unleashed its weapons at point-blank range. Beam after beam slammed into enemy hulls. Explosions ripped through Keth ships. One destroyer lost its engines and began to drift. Another took a direct hit to its bridge. The third destroyer tried to turn away, but it moved too slowly. The Indomitable flew beneath it and fired upward, tearing through the weaker armor on the ship's belly. The destroyer broke apart in a ball of fire. First kill, Hana reported, her voice tight with excitement. But there was no time to celebrate. More Keth ships were closing in. The frigate twisted and rolled through space, dodging fire from all directions. The battle lasted for hours. It should have been impossible. One ship should not have been able to survive against so many. But the crew of the Indomitable fought with a fury that shocked their enemies. Taiho kept the engines running, even when warning lights told him they should have failed long ago. He rerouted power from everywhere he could. Life support went to minimum. Lights went dim. Everything that was not essential to fighting was shut down. Du Hun calculated angles and trajectories faster than any computer. He found weaknesses in enemy formations that the Keth did not know they had. He made the Indomitable dance through fields of missile fire like a ghost. Hana tracked every enemy ship, calling out threats before they could become dangers. Her eyes never left her screens. Her hands never stopped moving, and Yuna commanded them all. She made decisions in split seconds that would have taken other commanders minutes. She kept her crew calm when they should have panicked. She kept them fighting when they should have died by the time the reinforcement signal reached the system. The Indomitable had destroyed 9 enemy ships. 14 more were crippled and drifting. The human frigate was damaged and bleeding smoke, but it was still flying. The Keth fleet was in chaos. They had never faced anything like this. They did not know how to fight an enemy that refused to accept defeat. Then space itself seemed to tear open. 12 new contacts appeared on every sensor screen. 12 human warships, led by the massive dreadnought called the Horizon, dropped out of hyperspace. Admiral Sun Wu's voice crackled over the communication channel. This is Admiral Sun Wu of the United Earth Navy. Commander Yuna, we received your beacon. The cavalry has arrived. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the crew cheered. Tears ran down faces that had been tight with fear for hours. They had held the line. They had survived. The Keth fleet tried to regroup, but it was too late. The human reinforcements swept through them like a hurricane. Ships that had seemed so powerful against the Velen crumbled before the Earth fleet. Commander Rillen watched his fleet fall apart around him. He had conquered a dozen worlds. He had never lost a battle. And now he was being destroyed by creatures from a death world. His flagship took a direct hit. Systems failed. Power went out. The mighty Keth commander sat in the darkness of his broken ship and understood something terrible. He had made a mistake. He had thought humans were just another species. He had thought they would be easy to frighten. He had been wrong. The Battle of Velum Prime was over. The Keth had lost. And across the galaxy, species who had ignored the Velen's call for help watched the footage and wondered about the strange creatures called humans. What kind of species would risk everything to save strangers? What kind of species would fight against impossible odds and win? What kind of species would answer a cry for help from halfway across the galaxy? The answer was simple. The answer was human. The battle was over, but the work was not finished. The Keth survivors surrendered quickly once they realized they could not win. Their ships powered down their weapons. Their soldiers put down their arms. The proud conquerors had become prisoners in a single day. Admiral Sunwoo stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Horizon, and watched the cleanup operations. Medical ships were rushing to the planet below. Engineers were already planning how to rebuild the destroyed orbital stations. Soldiers were preparing to search for survivors in the ruins. But Sunwoo had one more task to complete. She needed to face the enemy commander. The boarding party left the Horizon in a small shuttle. Sunwoo led them herself, along with Lieutenant Commander Jiho, a quiet man who served as her aide. They flew toward Rillen's broken flagship, which drifted in space like a wounded animal. The Keth ship was dark inside. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. The air smelled like smoke and something bitter. Broken equipment lay scattered on the floors. Keth crew members pressed themselves against the walls as the humans walked past. They did not attack. They did not even speak. They just watched with wide eyes full of something that might have been fear. Jiho noticed this and leaned close to the Admiral. "They are afraid of us." Sunwoo nodded. "Good, they should be." But she did not say it with pride. She said it with sadness. She had never wanted to make anyone afraid. She had only wanted to save lives. They found Commander Rillen in his command chamber at the heart of the ship. The room was wrecked. Screens were shattered. Chairs were overturned. In the middle of it all, Rillen sat on his broken throne. He was wounded. A large crack ran across his shell armor, and green blood leaked from his side. But his eyes were still hard. His claws still clicked together as the humans approached. "So," Rillen said, "the Deathworlders come to claim their prize. Go ahead. Kill me. I will not beg for my life." Admiral Sunwoo removed her helmet. Her face was older than Yuna's, marked with scars from battles fought long ago. Her gray hair was cut short. Her eyes held no hatred. Instead, they held something that confused Rillen deeply. They held pity. "We did not come here to kill you," Sunwoo said. "We came here to talk." Rillen laughed. It was a weak sound, broken by pain. "Talk? What is there to talk about? You won. I lost. That is how the universe works, is it?" Sunwoo walked closer until she was standing directly in front of the wounded Keth. "Is that really what you believe? That the strong simply take from the weak? That might is the only thing that matters?" Rillen's claws stopped clicking. "It is the truth. It has always been the truth. The strong survive. The weak are food. This is the natural order. That is what your species believes," Sunwoo agreed. "But let me show you what my species believes." She turned to Jiho and nodded. The lieutenant commander pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic display appeared in the air between them. Images began to flow. Images of Earth. Images of human history. Rillen saw wars. Countless wars. Humans fighting each other across thousands of years. He saw weapons become more and more deadly. Swords became guns. Guns became bombs. Bombs became things that could destroy entire cities. "We are violent," Sunwoo admitted. "More violent than any species in the galaxy. We have killed more of our own kind than most species have killed in total. Our history is written in blood." Rillen nodded slowly. "Then you understand. You understand the law of the strong." "No," Sunwoo said. "You are missing the point. Keep watching." The images changed. Now Rillen saw something different. He saw humans helping each other after disasters. He saw doctors treating the sick. He saw firefighters running into burning buildings. He saw ordinary people risking their lives to save strangers. After every war, we rebuilt, Sunwoo explained. After every tragedy, we came together. After every time we fell down, we got back up. Not because we are the strongest species in the galaxy, but because we refuse to give up on each other. She pointed at the images. Do you see this? This is a human carrying another human out of a flood. They do not know each other. They have never met before. But one of them is drowning, so the other one jumped into the water without thinking. Rillen stared at the image. His translator implants struggled to find the right words for what he was seeing. His species had no concept for this kind of behavior. We call it compassion, Sunwoo said. We call it empathy. We call it humanity. These are the things that make us who we are. Not our strength, not our ability to kill, but our refusal to abandon those who need us. She reached up and touched one of the scars on her face. I got this scar 20 years ago. An enemy soldier shot me during a battle. Do you know what happened next? Our medics treated him. They saved his life. Because he was wounded, and that is what we do. We help people, even our enemies, even people who try to kill us. Rillen was silent for a long moment. His eyes moved between Sunwoo's face and the holographic images still playing in the air. I do not understand, he said finally. If you are this powerful, why do you help the weak? Why not simply take what you want? You could conquer the galaxy. You could rule over all other species. Why do you choose to protect them instead? Sunwoo smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. Because we remember what it was like to be weak, she said. Our planet tried to kill us every day. We know what it feels like to be small and scared and helpless. We know what it feels like to need help that never comes. She leaned closer to Rillen. The Velen called for help. They sent their message across the stars, hoping that someone would care enough to answer. And we did. Not because they could give us anything. Not because we wanted their planet or resources. But because they needed us. Sunwoo straightened up and looked down at the wounded Keth commander. You asked me what kind of creatures we are. I will tell you. We are the species that runs towards screaming. We are the species that stands between the strong and the weak. We are the species that fights hardest when we are protecting others. She paused. You came here thinking you were the predator. You were wrong. The Velen were not prey. They were under our protection. And now you know what happens to anyone who threatens the people we protect. Rillen lowered his head. For the first time in his long life, he felt small. Not because the humans were stronger than him, but because they were something he could not understand. Something he could not defeat. They were not just Deathworlders. They were something more. What will you do with me? He asked quietly. Sunwoo turned and began to walk away. At the door, she stopped and looked back. We will treat your wounds. We will give you food and water. We will take you to a place where you can be judged for your crimes. She paused. And when you are hungry, we will feed you. When you are cold, we will give you warmth. Because that is what humans do. Rillen stared after her as she left. His claws hung at his sides. His eyes were empty. He had conquered a dozen worlds. He had made countless species bow before him. He had never known defeat. But now he understood something that terrified him. More than any weapon, he understood what humanity really was. And he knew that the galaxy would never be the same. In the weeks that followed the battle, human ships remained in orbit around Volan Prime. They did not leave after the fighting stopped. They stayed to help medical teams work day and night on the planet's surface. Human doctors learned to treat Velen injuries, even though their bodies were so different from human bodies. They learned which medicines were safe. They learned how to handle patients who were tall and fragile and scared. Engineering teams began rebuilding what the Keth had destroyed. They repaired power stations. They fixed water systems. They cleared debris from the streets. Human construction machines worked alongside Velen workers. And slowly, the ruined cities began to rise again. Soldiers patrolled the refugee camps. But they did not patrol like conquerors. They patrolled like protectors. They handed out food. They played with children. They stood guard through long nights so that survivors could finally sleep without fear. Nari was one of these soldiers. She was young, barely 23 years old, and this was her first real mission outside of Earth's solar system. She had joined the United Earth Navy because she wanted to help people. Now she was getting her chance. One day, she found a small Velen child sitting alone in the corner of a medical tent. The child was thin and shaking. Her large, dark eyes were filled with a pain that had nothing to do with physical wounds. Nari learned later that the child's entire family had died in the first attack. Her parents, her brothers, everyone she loved. She had been found wandering through the ruins, too shocked to cry, too broken to speak Dot at first. The child was terrified of Nari. Humans were so different from Velen. They were solid and heavy. They moved with a confidence that seemed almost aggressive. Their voices were deep and loud, but Nari did not give up. She sat with the child every day. She did not try to talk at first. She just sat nearby, quiet and calm, letting the child get used to her presence. After 3 days, the child stopped flinching when Nari came close. After a week, the child let Nari sit next to her Dot. After 2 weeks, the child reached out and touched Nari's hand. Her thin fingers wrapped around Nari's thick ones, and she held on like she was afraid to let go. Nari did not let go either. She taught the child simple games. Clapping games. Counting games. Games that did not need words. She shared her food, carefully choosing things that Velen could eat safely. She learned to hum Velen songs that the child's mother used to sing. Slowly, the child began to heal. Not completely. Some wounds never heal completely, but enough to smile again. Enough to trust again. Enough to believe that maybe the universe was not entirely cruel. News of what happened at Velen Prime spread across the galaxy. Every species with access to communication networks saw the footage. They saw one human ship fighting against an entire fleet. They saw the reinforcements arriving just in time. They saw the Keth surrender. But most importantly, they saw what happened after. They saw human doctors treating alien patients. They saw human engineers rebuilding alien cities. They saw human soldiers protecting alien children. They saw a species that had won a war and then stayed to win the peace. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Representatives from more than 100 worlds gathered in the Great Chamber, a massive dome floating in neutral space. They came to discuss the Velen incident. They came to discuss the humans. Ambassador Minji represented Earth at the council. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. She had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. She had negotiated treaties and prevented wars and spoken for her species in 100 different languages. But this speech would be different. This speech would change everything. She stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by delegates who watched her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The Deathworlders were here. What would they say? Minji began to speak. For centuries, you have called us Deathworlders. You have been afraid of us. You have kept your distance from us. You have whispered about the terrible planet we come from and the violent history we carry. She paused and looked around the chamber. And you were right to be careful. We are dangerous. We are strong. We are capable of violence that would shock most species in this galaxy. Some delegates shifted nervously in their seats. Others nodded, confirming their fears. But you misunderstood what makes us dangerous, Minji continued. You thought it was our strength. You thought it was our weapons. You thought it was our ability to survive on a death world. She shook her head. You were wrong. What makes us dangerous is something much simpler. What makes us dangerous is that we care. The chamber fell silent. The Velans sent a message into the void. They called for help. They begged for someone to save them. That message traveled past 100 worlds, and no one responded. No one thought it was worth the risk. No one thought the Velan were worth saving. Minji's voice grew stronger. But we did. One human ship heard that call and flew 18 light years to answer it. One captain decided that the lives of strangers were worth dying for. One crew fought against impossible odds because they could not stand by while innocent people suffered. She pointed at the screens, showing footage from Velan Prime. Look at these images. Look at our doctors treating your sick. Look at our engineers rebuilding your cities. Look at our soldiers protecting your children. This is what humans do. This is who we are. She took a deep breath. From this day forward, I make a promise on behalf of Earth. A promise that will be written into our laws. A promise that will guide our actions across the galaxy. The entire chamber held its breath. Any species that calls for help will find humans answering. It does not matter if you are our allies. It does not matter if you have anything to offer us. It does not matter if the odds are impossible. If you are in danger, we will come. She looked directly at the Velan delegate, a fragile being who had expected to watch her species die and instead found salvation. We will come because we remember what it was like to be alone. We will come because we know what it feels like to face a universe that wants you dead. We will come because helping others is not just something we do. It is something we are. Minji spread her arms wide. We survived our death world. Now we help others survive theirs. That is our purpose. That is our choice. That is what it means to be human. She lowered her arms and smiled. You can call us Deathworlders if you want. But maybe it is time for a new name. Maybe it is time to call us what we really are. Maybe it is time to call us what we really are. She looked around the chamber one final time. We are the guardians of the galaxy. And we are just getting started. The speech ended. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the Velan delegate stood up. Her thin body was shaking, but her voice was clear. On behalf of my people, she said, I thank the humans. You saved us when no one else would. You fought for us when no one else cared. We will never forget what you did. One by one, other delegates began to stand. Some nodded. Some applauded. Some wiped tears from eyes that had never cried for another species. The galaxy was changing. The humans had shown them something new. Something they had never believed was possible. They had shown them that strength could be used for protection instead of conquest. That violence could be harnessed for good instead of evil. That a death world could produce a species that loved life more than anything else in the universe. Years later, Velan children would grow up hearing stories about the day the Deathworlders came. They would learn about Commander Yuna and her brave crew. They would learn about Admiral Sunwoo and her message to Commander Rillen. They would learn about the soldier named Nari who sat with us, lonely child until she smiled again. And when those children looked up at the stars, they would not feel afraid, because somewhere out there, the humans were watching. Somewhere out there, the Deathworlders stood ready to answer any call, ready to fight any enemy, ready to protect anyone who needed them. That is what humans do. That is what humans will always do. And that is why the galaxy finally understood the truth about the Deathworlders. They were not monsters. They were heroes.